playfully mocked his hair loss at a party. I didn't think he'd try to ruin my life. Hi Reddit, my name is Emily and I am 33 years old. I never thought a single joke could change my life so drastically. Looking back, it feels ridiculous that something so small could set off a chain reaction that destroyed everything I thought was secure. But here I am, trying to pick up the pieces of a life I shattered with my own carelessness. For some context, I've been married to Matt for almost 10 years. He's 36 now, and while he's always been a kind, dependable man, he's also been deeply insecure about certain things, his looks mostly. Matt started losing his hair in his early 30s, and while he tried to laugh it off at first, I could tell it bothered him. He started wearing hats more often and experimenting with hair products and thickening sprays. Over time, it became something of a sore spot. Whenever we'd watch TV, he'd comment bitterly on actors with perfect hairlines, and whenever he saw himself in photos, he'd get this look on his face like he was bracing for criticism. I've always been the type to use humor as a way to lighten the mood. Teasing Matt about his hair was something I did occasionally, not to hurt him, but to make him laugh. I thought it was harmless. Sometimes I'd make a playful comment when he spent too long fussing with his hair in the bathroom, or I'd joke that he was starting to look like a certain bald celebrity. He usually rolled his eyes or laughed it off, so I figured it wasn't a big deal. I never thought it bothered him, as much as it apparently did. The night of the party was like any other social event for us. It was a mutual friend's birthday, and I was excited to go out and unwind. I hadn't planned on drinking much, but as the night went on and the drinks started flowing, I found myself loosening up more than usual. Matt was mingling, as he always did, making polite small talk with people. He's never been the center of attention type, but he's good at holding his own in a crowd. I, on the other hand, tend to gravitate toward the louder side of things. I've always enjoyed making people laugh, and that night was no exception. At one point during the evening, we were all gathered around, sharing funny stories and cracking jokes. It was one of those moments where everyone was in high spirits, and I felt like I was on a roll. The jokes were landing, people were laughing, and I was enjoying the attention. Then someone made a comment about getting older, and before I even thought about it, I chimed in with a joke about Matt's hair. I don't remember the exact words I used, but it was something like, "Well, Matt's got a head start on all of us, doesn't he?" Everyone laughed hard, but the second the words left my mouth, I saw his face change. There was this flicker of hurt in his eyes that he tried to hide with a forced smile, but I knew I'd crossed a line. The room erupted into laughter, and I played along, pretending like it was all in good fun. I figured he'd brush it off like he usually did, and we'd laugh about it later. But the rest of the night, Matt was quieter than usual. He stuck close to the edges of the room, nursing his drink and avoiding eye contact with me. I told myself he was just being sensitive and that it would blow over, but deep down, I knew I'd embarrassed him in front of our friends. When we got home, the tension was palpable. Matt didn't say much, and when I tried to ask if he was okay, he just shrugged it off and went to bed. I didn't push him. I assumed he'd cool off by morning and that we'd talk it out then. After all, it wasn't the first time I'd teased him about his hair. I didn't think it was a big deal. But in the days that followed, things only got worse. Looking back, I realize now how oblivious I was. I thought I knew Matt, thought I understood how far I could push before it really hurt him, but I didn't. What I thought was harmless teasing was, to him, a public humiliation that amplified every insecurity he'd been carrying in silence. And that one moment, that one harmless joke, was the spark that set fire to everything we'd built together. The moment Matt walked out of the party, I knew I'd gone too far. He didn't make a scene or say anything dramatic. He just put down his drink, muttered something about needing air, and left. I watched him go, my stomach sinking, but I stayed behind thinking he'd come back after a few minutes. He didn't. The rest of the night felt like a blur after that, with the laughter and chatter around me barely registering as I kept glancing at the door, waiting for him to reappear. When I got home later, the house was dark, and Matt's car wasn't in the driveway. My chest tightened as I walked inside, hoping he'd already come back and gone to bed. But the bedroom was empty, the sheets untouched. I stayed up for hours, texting and calling him, but he didn't respond. By the time I finally fell asleep on the couch, my mind was racing with every possible scenario. Was he just blowing off steam somewhere? Or was he really that upset about the joke? The next morning, Matt still wasn't home. I tried calling him again, but it went straight to voicemail. I spent the entire day pacing the house, alternating between frustration and guilt. I kept telling myself he was overreacting, that it was just a harmless joke, and that he'd come back once he'd cooled down. But as the hours ticked by, that confidence started to waver. When he finally came home that evening, his face was blank, his eyes tired, and he barely acknowledged me as he walked past. I tried to talk to him, to apologize, but he cut me off with a short, dismissive answer and locked himself in the spare bedroom. It was like he'd built an invisible wall between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break through it. Over the next few days, he became more distant, spending as little time at home as he pleased. When he wasn't out of the house entirely, he was holed up in the spare room with the door shut, avoiding me at all costs. Every attempt I made to apologize was met with indifference or silence. The tension in the house was suffocating. I kept replaying the party in my head, trying to convince myself that I hadn't done anything that bad. It was just a joke, a single comment that everyone laughed at. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how wrong I'd been. Matt wasn't laughing. He hadn't been laughing for a long time, and I'd ignored all the signs. This wasn't just about that. He was shutting me out completely, and I didn't know how to fix it. I started to panic. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Matt was coming home later and later, spending his evenings out with friends or running errands, without offering any real explanations. When I pressed him for details, he'd snap back that it wasn't my business. That hurt more than I want to admit. I'd always been the one in control in our relationship, the one who dictated how things went, but now I felt like I was grasping at straws, trying to hold on to something that was slipping through my fingers. And then the bombshell dropped. It happened on a quiet evening, a few days after the party. I was scrolling through my phone when I got a message from a coworker. It was short and vague, but the tone made my heart race. They asked if I was okay and mentioned that they'd heard something wild about me from someone in our circle. I didn't know what to make of it at first, but as more messages started trickling in, the picture became painfully clear. Matt had found out about the affair. I don't know how he figured it out. Maybe he'd seen something in my phone, or maybe he'd been suspicious for a while and finally decided to dig deeper. Either way, he knew everything. He knew about Ryan, my coworker, and the months we'd been seeing each other behind his back, and he wasn't keeping it to himself. Matt had started telling people, our friends, our families, even people at my office. He wasn't just confronting me, he was exposing me. At first I couldn't believe it. Matt had always been so reserved, so private. He hated airing our dirty laundry in front of others. But this wasn't the man I thought I knew. This was someone who had been pushed too far, someone who wanted to hurt me as much as I'd hurt him. He wasn't just angry, he was vengeful, and he was making sure everyone knew exactly what I'd done. The fallout was immediate and brutal. My phone became a minefield of messages, some from people expressing their shock, others outright condemning me. Mutual friends who used to greet me with warmth now kept their distance, and coworkers who had always been friendly suddenly seemed awkward and uncomfortable around me. The worst part was knowing that Matt had every right to do this. I'd betrayed him, and now I was paying the price. Ryan, the man I'd risked everything for, wasn't much help either. When I confronted him about what was happening, he brushed it off, saying he didn't want to get involved in drama. His attitude made it painfully clear that I was on my own. I'd let myself believe that Ryan cared about me, that what we had was more than just a fling. But when things got messy, he distanced himself faster than I could blink. It was like I didn't even matter to him anymore. I felt like my world was crumbling around me. Matt wasn't just hurt, he was determined to destroy the image I'd worked so hard to maintain. He told his family, my family, and anyone who would listen about the affair. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a war zone. Every time I saw Matt, his expression was cold, calculating, like he was waiting for the next opportunity to twist the knife. I tried begging him to stop, to handle things privately, but it was too late. The damage was done. Everywhere I turned, I was met with judgment and isolation. Friends who used to invite me to brunch stopped reaching out. Family members who once praised my perfect marriage now looked at me with disappointment and pity. I had never felt so alone in my life. And through it all, Matt stayed distant, a constant reminder of the mess I'd created and the man I'd underestimated. When I look back at how things started unraveling between Matt and me, I can't point to one single moment that caused it. It wasn't like we had some massive fight or a sudden realization that we weren't compatible. It was more like a slow erosion, the kind you don't notice until it's already eaten away at the foundation of everything you thought was solid. And by the time I realized how far gone we were, I was already making decisions that would destroy us completely. Matt and I had been married for almost 10 years. In the beginning, everything felt easy, like we were perfectly in sync. He was the kind of guy you could rely on, steady, thoughtful, and always willing to go the extra mile for the people he loved. He made me feel safe, like I'd found someone who would always have my back. But over time, that steadiness started to feel more like stagnation. The little things that used to make me love him, the way he'd focus so intensely on a project, or how he always put others first, just started to frustrate me. I think it started with his insecurities. Matt had always been self-conscious about his looks, but it got worse as he got older. His hairline began receding in his early 30s, and it was like a switch flipped in him. He became hyper-aware of how he looked in photos, how people perceived him. He tried to laugh it off most of the time, but I could tell it bothered him. He started wearing hats all the time, even in situations where they weren't necessary, and he spent more and more time obsessing over his appearance in the mirror. At first, I tried to be supportive. I told him he looked fine, that he was still the same person I fell in love with. But after a while, his constant need for reassurance started to wear on me. It felt like I was always walking on eggshells, trying not to say or do anything that might make him feel worse. And no matter what I said, it never seemed to be enough. He'd brush off my compliments, saying I was just trying to make him feel better. It was exhausting, and eventually I stopped trying as hard. I figured if he didn't believe me, what was the point? At the same time, I started to feel invisible in our marriage. Matt threw himself into his work, and while I knew he was doing it to provide for us, it felt like I was being left behind. He'd come home late, too tired to talk, and spend the weekends catching up on projects or zoning out in front of the TV. The intimacy between us, both emotional and physical, began to fade. I'd sit next to him on the couch, scrolling through my phone, and wonder if this was it. Was this what our life was going to be? Two people living in the same house, sharing the same space, but barely connecting? That's when Ryan came into the picture. He was a coworker of mine, younger by a few years and full of energy in a way that felt refreshing. Ryan was charming in a way that Matt had never been, and he was effortlessly confident, always cracking jokes and making everyone around him feel like they were the most important person in the room. At first, he was just a friend, someone I enjoyed chatting with during breaks or working on projects with. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized how much I craved the attention he gave me. Ryan noticed things about me that Matt hadn't in years. He'd compliment my outfits, ask about my interests, and actually listen when I talked. It felt good, better than I wanted to admit. I started looking forward to going to work, to those moments when Ryan would stop by my desk or invite me to grab coffee. It was harmless, I told myself, just two coworkers getting along well. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was leaning on Ryan in a way that I should have been leaning on Matt. The first time things crossed the line, it felt almost inevitable. We'd stayed late at the office to finish a project, and one thing led to another. Before I knew it, we were kissing, and all the guilt and doubt in my head was drowned out by the rush of feeling wanted again. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a moment of weakness that wouldn't happen again, but of course it did. The kisses turned into secret lunches, stolen moments in parking lots, and eventually full-blown hotel meetups. What started as an emotional connection quickly became physical, and I let it happen because it filled the void I felt in my marriage. I justified it in every way possible. I told myself that it wasn't hurting anyone because Matt didn't know. I convinced myself that I deserved to be happy, that it wasn't my fault Matt had stopped paying attention to me. I even told myself that the affair was helping me be a better wife, that the excitement and validation I got from Ryan made me more patient and understanding with Matt. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I was building a house of cards, and it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. For months, I lived a double life. At home, I was the dutiful wife, pretending everything was fine. At work, I was Ryan's secret lover, sneaking around and keeping our relationship hidden from everyone. The thrill of it was intoxicating, but there was always a part of me that felt like I was walking on thin ice. Every time I looked at Matt, I felt a pang of guilt that I quickly pushed aside. I didn't want to think about what would happen if he found out. I convinced myself that as long as I kept the affair hidden, I could have the best of both worlds. But Matt wasn't as clueless as I thought. Looking back, there were signs that he was suspicious. He started asking more questions about my schedule, commenting on how often I stayed late at work or went out with friends. I brushed off his concerns, telling him he was being paranoid. I figured he was just projecting his own insecurities onto me, and I didn't take it seriously. I was so focused on keeping up my facade that I didn't notice how much Matt was changing. The quiet, reserved man I thought I knew was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who was paying closer attention than I realized. When Matt found out about the affair, it was like the ground was ripped out from under me. He didn't confront me directly, didn't yell or scream or demand answers. Instead, he started telling people, our friends, our families, even people I worked with. He took what I thought was my carefully guarded secret and turned it into a weapon, exposing everything I'd tried so hard to keep hidden. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt him. It was the humiliation, the realization that I'd been lying to him while he'd been trying to hold our marriage together. I couldn't believe he would do something like that. Matt had always been so private, so careful about keeping our personal lives separate from the outside world. But now, he was airing all our dirty laundry for everyone to see. And the worst part was, I couldn't even blame him. I'd pushed him to this point with my choices, and now I was watching as everything I'd tried to protect came crashing down around me. The affair with Ryan wasn't just a mistake. It was a series of choices that I made over and over again, knowing the risks, but convincing myself they didn't matter. I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone, but now I see how wrong I was. I hurt Matt, I hurt our families, and I hurt myself. And the worst part is, I don't know how to fix it. The damage is done, and there's no going back. When everything started to unravel, I thought I could handle it. I thought the worst was already behind me. Matt's anger, his coldness, the way he avoided me at home, I figured those were the worst consequences of my actions. I didn't realize that he was just getting started, or that he was capable of destroying my life in ways I never imagined. It began with a single post on social media. I woke up one morning, checked my phone as I always did, and saw that I'd been tagged in a post by Matt. At first, I thought it was a mistake. He rarely posted anything, let alone something that involved me. But as I clicked on the notification and read the post, my stomach dropped. There, for everyone to see, he had written about my affair. It wasn't vague or cryptic. He laid everything out, about how I had betrayed him, how I'd been lying to him for months, and how hurt and humiliated he felt. He even tagged Ryan, the man I'd been seeing, as well as a handful of our mutual friends. I couldn't breathe. The post was already flooded with comments, people expressing their shock, their disgust, their sympathy for Matt. Some of them were friends I hadn't spoken to in years, but most were people we interacted with regularly. They were taking his side, calling me names, and saying things that made my chest tighten with shame and anger. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to explain that it wasn't as simple as Matt was making it seem. But I knew that anything I said would only make things worse. I spent the rest of the day trying to do damage control. I deleted the tags on my account and set my profile to private, but the post was already out there. People had screenshotted it, shared it, and spread it around like wildfire. By the end of the day, I had messages flooding my inbox, some from friends asking if it was true, others from people I barely knew telling me what a horrible person I was. It felt like the walls were closing in on me and there was no escape. The worst part was how calculated it all felt. Matt wasn't just venting his emotions. He was methodically tearing me down in every way possible. Over the next few days, he posted more screenshots of text messages between Ryan and me, photos of us together that I didn't even realize he had. He shared every piece of evidence he'd gathered, tagging more people each time. He even tagged some of my coworkers, ensuring that the scandal would bleed into my professional life. I couldn't understand how he'd managed to collect so much without me noticing. He must have been suspicious for months, maybe even longer, and I'd been so wrapped up in my own lies that I didn't see it. The texts he shared were damning, flirty, intimate, the kind of messages that left no room for doubt about what was going on. The photos were even worse. There was one of Ryan and me leaving a hotel together, another of us sitting too close at a bar during what I'd told Matt was a work dinner. It was all there, laid out for the world to see. My coworkers started treating me differently almost immediately. People who used to greet me with smiles now avoided eye contact in the hallways. Conversations would stop the moment I entered the break room, and the whispers were impossible to ignore. I overheard one of my colleagues saying that I'd brought shame to the office and that they wouldn't be surprised if I got fired. It felt like I was walking around with a scarlet letter on my chest, and no matter how hard I tried to keep my head down and focus on work, I couldn't escape the judgment. My family wasn't spared either. Matt had reached out to both his family and mine, sharing everything he knew. My mom called me in tears, asking how I could have done something so horrible. She said she didn't recognize the person I'd become, and hearing the disappointment in her voice was like a dagger to my heart. My dad, always the more reserved one, simply said he didn't want to talk about it. It felt like they were mourning the version of me they thought they knew, and I didn't know how to explain that I was still their daughter, just a deeply flawed one. Matt's family was even less forgiving. His sister, who had always been kind to me, sent me a long message detailing how I'd ruined their family's trust and how I didn't deserve someone like Matt. His parents refused to speak to me at all, cutting me off completely. It was clear that they were rallying around him, supporting him in every way, while I was left to fend for myself. The judgment from our mutual friends was relentless. People I'd once considered close started unfriending me online, ignoring my messages, and making it clear that they wanted nothing to do with me. I felt like I was being erased from our social circle, one person at a time. Even the friends who didn't cut ties completely kept their distance, hesitant to associate with someone who had become the subject of such a public scandal. And then there was Ryan. The man I had risked everything for was nowhere to be found. When I tried to talk to him about what was happening, he brushed me off, saying he didn't want to be involved in drama. He made it clear that our relationship, if you could even call it that, was over. He didn't want to deal with the fallout, didn't want his name dragged through the mud any more than it already was. It was like I was nothing more than a temporary thrill to him, and now that things were messy, he was done. The isolation was suffocating. I spent most days locked in the house, too ashamed to go out in public. The few times I did venture out, I felt like everyone was staring at me, like they all knew who I was and what I'd done. I stopped answering my phone, stopped checking social media, and tried to shut out the noise. But it was impossible. The weight of the judgment, the shame, and the regret was crushing me. I don't know how to move forward from this. Matt has made it clear that he wants to ruin me completely, and I don't know how to stop him. Every time I think he's done, he finds another way to twist the knife. He's taken everything from me, my reputation, my social circle, my job security, and I don't know how to fight back. I feel like a shell of the person I used to be, and I don't know if I'll ever recover. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been a week since my initial post, and somehow things have gotten even worse. I thought that the public humiliation and the fallout from Matt's social media posts were the lowest points, but I was wrong. This week, I've had to come to terms with just how much damage has been done, not just to my reputation, but to every aspect of my life. I feel like I'm standing in the middle of the wreckage, trying to salvage something, anything, but it's all slipping through my fingers. The biggest blow came 2 days ago when I received official divorce papers from Matt's lawyer. I knew it was coming. I'd been bracing myself ever since he started exposing everything, but seeing it in black and white made it all feel real in a way I wasn't prepared for. He's not just asking for a divorce. He's seeking full custody of our 2 children. The papers outline his claims in brutal detail, citing my infidelity and the unstable home environment as reasons why he believes he should be granted sole custody. I can't even describe the feeling of reading those words. It was like someone had reached into my chest and ripped my heart out. I love my children more than anything, and the thought of losing them is unbearable. But Matt is building a strong case against me, and I'm terrified he might actually succeed. He's using everything against me, his posts, the screenshots, the photos, all of it is now evidence. He's framing me as an unfit mother, someone who prioritized an affair over her family. And the worst part is, I don't know how to fight back because, in so many ways, he's right. I've always considered myself a good mother. I've been there for my kids, taking care of them, helping with homework, packing lunches, and making sure they feel loved. But now, all of that is being overshadowed by my mistakes. Matt is painting a picture of me as selfish, reckless, and incapable of providing a stable environment for them. He's telling anyone who will listen that I can't be trusted, and I'm terrified that the courts will believe him. I've started meeting with a lawyer, but even they've warned me that Matt's case is strong. They've said I need to prepare for the possibility that I won't get primary custody. The kids have started to pick up on the tension, even though I've tried my best to shield them from it. They're young, but they're not stupid. They've noticed that Matt isn't around as much and that I've been crying more than usual. I've overheard them talking to each other, asking why Daddy seems so mad and why Mommy looks so sad. It breaks my heart because I don't have any answers for them. I don't know how to explain what's happening without making them feel like they have to choose sides. I can already feel Matt's influence creeping in. He's been spending more time with them, taking them out for fun activities, and making sure they know how much he loves them. I can't compete with that. I'm stuck here, trying to hold everything together while he gets to play the hero. As if all of that wasn't bad enough, Ryan has officially distanced himself from me. I knew he wasn't the type to stick around when things got tough, but I didn't think he'd abandon me completely. I reached out to him a few days ago, desperate for some kind of support, but he shut me down almost immediately. He said he didn't sign up for this kind of drama, and that he needed to focus on his own life. Hearing those words felt like the final nail in the coffin. I risked everything for him, my marriage, my reputation, my family, and now he's treating me like I'm nothing more than a problem he's glad to be rid of. I can't believe how naive I was. I thought Ryan cared about me, that what we had was real, but now I see that I was just a distraction for him, something exciting and forbidden that he could walk away from when it became inconvenient. He doesn't have to deal with the fallout, the judgment, the shame, the pain of losing everything. He gets to move on with his life while I'm left to clean up the mess we created. The isolation is crushing. My friends, the ones I thought I could rely on, have either sided with Matt or decided to stay out of it altogether. The ones who do reach out only do so to ask questions or gossip, not to offer any real support. My family is still reeling from everything, and while they haven't completely cut me off, their disappointment is palpable. I feel like I'm carrying this weight all by myself, and it's suffocating. Everywhere I go, I feel like people are staring at me, judging me. I can't go to the grocery store without wondering if the cashier has seen Matt's posts, or if the other parents at school are whispering about me. I've stopped going to social events because I can't handle the looks or the awkward conversations. I feel like I'm trapped in a bubble of shame, unable to escape or move forward. The house feels emptier than ever. Matt still comes by to see the kids, but he avoids me as much as possible. When he does speak to me, it's cold and transactional, like I'm nothing more than an obstacle he has to deal with. I miss the way things used to be, even though I know I'm the one who ruined it. I keep replaying the last few months in my head, wondering how I let things get this bad. How did I let my resentment and loneliness push me to make decisions that would cost me everything? I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm drowning, and every time I try to reach out for help, I come up empty-handed. Matt is determined to take the kids from me, and I don't know how to stop him. Ryan has made it clear that he wants nothing to do with me, and my support system has all but disappeared. I'm scared of what the future holds, and I don't know how to find my footing again. Reddit, I'm begging for advice. How do I rebuild my life after something like this? How do I prove to my kids that I'm still a good mother when the world is telling them otherwise? How do I move forward when everything I had is gone? If anyone has been through something like this, please, I need your help. I feel like I'm losing everything, and I don't know how much more I can take. Update. Reddits. It's been 8 weeks since my first post, and every day feels like a new reminder of how much my life has fallen apart. Just when I think I've hit the lowest point, something else happens to prove me wrong. It's like everything I had is slipping further and further away, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. Meanwhile, Matt seems to be thriving, which makes it all hurt even more. The latest blow came a few days ago when I found out Matt is dating someone new. A friend of mine, one of the few who still talks to me, told me that he's been seeing a younger woman he met at his gym. Apparently, she's in her late 20s, fit, bubbly, and everything I'm not right now. From what I've heard, they've been going out regularly, and she's even met some of his friends. I didn't think it was possible for my stomach to drop any further, but hearing that felt like a punch to the gut. I know I have no right to feel jealous. I'm the one who destroyed our marriage. I'm the one who betrayed him. But that doesn't make it any easier to see him moving on while I'm stuck in the ruins of what we had. He's out there living his best life by dating, working out, rebuilding his social circle, while I can barely get through the day without crying. The house feels emptier than ever, and every time the kids mention him, I feel a mix of guilt, sadness, and resentment that I don't know how to handle. What makes it worse is that Matt's professional life seems to be flourishing too. I have heard through mutual friends that he's been promoted at work, and his colleagues have been rallying around him, calling him an inspiration for turning his life around after what I did. It's like everything I've lost has become fuel for him to do better, to be better. I should feel happy for him, but instead I feel bitter. I can't stop thinking about how different things would be if he hadn't decided to expose me the way he did. The bitterness is eating away at me. I keep telling myself that Matt could have handled this privately, that he didn't need to drag our personal lives into the spotlight for everyone to see. If he had just confronted me directly, or even quietly filed for divorce, maybe things wouldn't have spiraled out of control like this. But instead, he chose to humiliate me, to make sure everyone knew what I'd done, and now I'm the one left to deal with the fallout while he gets to move forward with a clean slate. It feels unfair, even though I know I brought this on myself. I don't know what to do anymore. Part of me wants to reach out to Matt, to try to talk to him and see if there's any chance of salvaging what's left of our family dynamic. The kids deserve some kind of stability, and I don't want them to grow up feeling like they have to choose between us. But I don't even know if he'd listen. The way he looks at me now, it's like I'm a stranger, or worse, someone he doesn't care about at all. Reddit, I need advice. How do I cope with this? How do I move on when it feels like everything I had is gone and the person I hurt the most is thriving without me? Should I try to reach out to Matt, or is it too late to fix anything? I feel lost, and I don't know how to move forward from here. Scratch that. It's probably too late, and there's nothing more I can do. Matt will never forgive me, and he has ensured I know that through the extreme steps he took just to prove his point. I'm forever stuck in this misery that I created for myself, and I wish so desperately that I never was. Everything is just so shattered right now,